The sun was high that Saturday afternoon, and Marcus was finally enjoying the peace he had worked so hard for. His backyard had always been his sanctuary, the neatly trimmed grass, the gentle sway of the trees, and right at the center, the shimmering blue pool he had saved for years to build. With a cold drink in hand and music playing softly in the background, he leaned back in his chair, ready for a quiet weekend away from the stress of work. But his peace was short-lived. The sound of the gate creaking open caught his attention, and before he could stand, Karen from the HOA came striding in as if she owned the place. Her voice was sharp and commanding as she announced that she needed his pool for her daughter's birthday party later that afternoon. Marcus blinked, confused, thinking surely she was joking, but her serious tone told him otherwise. She went on about how hosting the party at his pool would make things easier for her and bring the neighborhood together. She didn't ask, she demanded, speaking as though his hard-earned property was a community park. Marcus tried to remain calm, politely reminding her that this was his private home, not a public space, and that he had his own plans for the weekend. Karen, however, wasn't interested in courtesy. She waved her hand dismissively, accusing him of being selfish, saying, "If you were a good neighbor, you'd do this for the kids." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had never even been invited to HOA events before, yet here she was, barging into his yard, acting entitled to what was his. For the first time since moving in, Marcus realized this wasn't just a neighborly disagreement. It was about someone trying to take advantage of him. Marcus stood firm, but Karen wasn't about to back down. Folding her arms tightly across her chest, she leaned forward as if trying to intimidate him, her sunglasses now sliding down her nose. "You're being unneighborly," she snapped, her voice rising louder with every word. She launched into a speech about community spirit and how everyone in the neighborhood was expected to contribute, almost as if she was giving him a lecture instead of making a request. Marcus, still calm, reminded her that his pool was built with his own money, on his own property, and that it was not part of the HOA's shared amenities. He explained that he had worked long hours and made sacrifices to finally enjoy this little piece of peace in his backyard. But the more he spoke, the angrier Karen became. Her face flushed and she stomped one foot against the ground. "You can't just isolate yourself and refuse when the neighborhood needs you," she barked. Marcus was baffled. He had only lived there a short time and had never once been asked to join any neighborhood events. Yet now he was being accused of not being a team player. He tried to reason with her again, but Karen cut him off, shouting over his words as if her voice alone would drown out his refusal. She even threatened to bring the issue up at the next HOA meeting, claiming she had influence and could make his life difficult if he didn't comply. At that moment, Marcus realized this wasn't about kids swimming in a pool. It was about Karen's ego and her need for control. She wasn't asking out of kindness. She was demanding out of entitlement, and that made Marcus more determined than ever not to give in. After Karen stormed out of his yard in frustration, Marcus sat back down in his chair, his drink untouched, and stared at the calm surface of the pool. The afternoon sun glittered across the water, but his mind was anything but calm. He replayed the encounter in his head, the arrogance in Karen's tone, the way she had spoken as if his years of hard work meant nothing, as if she could simply take what was his by raising her voice. For a moment he considered ignoring the situation and moving on, but then a thought struck him. Why should he let someone walk all over him in his own home? Marcus wasn't the type to argue endlessly. He believed actions spoke louder than words. So, instead of wasting energy on another shouting match, he decided to send a message that Karen and the entire neighborhood would never forget. Later that evening, when the sun had gone down and the streetlights flickered on, Marcus rolled out a heavy-duty pump from his garage and connected it to the side of the pool. The quiet hum of the motor filled the night as water began to drain. Steadily, the once sparkling surface sinking lower and lower. By midnight, the pool was half empty, and by sunrise, nothing was left but a hollow basin of bare concrete. Marcus stood on his porch, sipping coffee, watching the mist rise from the empty pool, a small smile tugging at his lips. It wasn't petty revenge, it was a clear statement. If Karen thought she had the right to use his property without permission, then she would have to face the reality. He would rather strip it down completely than let her dictate how it was used. For the first time in days, Marcus felt in control again. The following afternoon, Marcus didn't have to wait long to see the results of his decision. Just after 2 o'clock, the sound of cars pulling up outside his house filled the street. Karen arrived first, stepping out in a bright summer dress, her arms full of balloons and party supplies, her face lit with confidence. Behind her, a line of parents and children followed, carrying gifts and trays of food, their voices buzzing with excitement about the pool party they had been promised. Karen led them straight through Marcus's gate without knocking, her head held high as if she was the hostess of the property. But the moment she turned the corner and saw the empty pool, just a hollow pit of gray, concrete baking under the sun, her expression froze. The color drained from her face, then returned in a wave of furious red. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the chatter. The children stood silent, confused, staring at the barren hole where sparkling water should have been. The parents exchanged awkward glances, whispering to each other as the truth slowly dawned. Karen hadn't secured permission at all. She had simply assumed control over something that didn't belong to her. Humiliated in front of her guests, Karen spun around and pointed at Marcus, who was calmly sitting on his porch with his coffee in hand. "You ruined everything!" she screamed. "How dare you embarrass me like this? You've ruined the children's day." But Marcus didn't flinch. He simply raised his mug in a silent toast, his calm demeanor making her fury boil even hotter. Desperate to regain control of the situation, Karen pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice dripping with false urgency as she told the operator that her neighbor was being hostile. Within minutes of Karen's dramatic phone call, 2 police cars rolled quietly into the neighborhood, their lights flashing but sirens off. The guests who had gathered for the supposed party whispered nervously, some shaking their heads as Karen waved her arms frantically at the officers, pointing toward Marcus. "He's the one! He's being unreasonable and hostile," she cried, her voice shrill with desperation. The officers remained calm, approaching Marcus, who sat on his porch as if nothing unusual was happening. He stood, greeted them respectfully, and handed over the deed to his property, explaining in a steady tone exactly what had happened, that his neighbor had demanded access to his private pool for her party, and when he refused, she escalated. The officers listened carefully, then turned to Karen, whose voice cracked as she tried to spin the story, claiming Marcus had drained the pool just to spite her. One officer finally shook his head and said firmly, "Ma'am, this pool is on his property. He has every right to use it or not use it as he pleases. There's nothing unlawful here." The crowd of parents and children began to disperse, murmuring about Karen's arrogance and poor judgment. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she realized she had not only lost the party, but also the respect of the neighborhood. The officers, clearly unimpressed, advised her to leave and reminded her that making false claims could have consequences. With no choice left, Karen stormed off, her balloons trailing pitifully behind her. Marcus returned to his chair, calm and unbothered, sipping the last of his coffee as the street slowly emptied. The message was clear: his home, his rules. And from that day forward, everyone in the neighborhood knew Marcus was not a man to be pushed around. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Subscribe to The Silent Side USA for more powerful stories every week.